Well, it's good to see you all interested in this issue, but we'll leave it there and we'll move on to culture and national identity. Our sixth question from the public comes from René Lachaine from Montreal. Let's hear what he has to say.
In November 2006, the big political parties in the House of Commons moved a motion proclaiming that Quebecers form a nation within a united Canada. I would like to know, in concrete terms, what does this mean for me? Will there be any real power in Quebec in this fact of being recognized?
To answer Mr. Lachaine's question, Mr. Harper will have the first 45 seconds.
Thank you. First, I'd like to say that recognizing the Quebec nation was a good thing, was a good gesture, and to recognize it for this country. And I'd like to mention, first off, my appreciation for the fact that Quebecers were very understanding, compassionate in my learning French over the past years. This is a very important part of our history, and so it's important for me. We've done other things to recognize the Quebec nation. We've given a place at UNESCO for Quebec. We've proposed measures for the CRTC to better represent the reality in Quebec and for other francophones. And I think these things are important in a federation such as ours.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Mr. Dion.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Lachaine. I'm also a member of this nation. I'm very proud of that. I recognize that we Quebecers, we form not just a distinct society, but also a nation. Mr. Harper asked us to recognize the Quebec nation. I was consulted on that, and we wanted to show that we'd also be part of the Canadian nation. That's a problem for Mr. Duceppe, not for me. I think it's excellent that we have two identities. And you have to respect the institutions, our own Quebec institutions. We also have to play a full role within the institutions that we share with other Canadians, because we have an enormous role to play with this great country, and this great country Canada, which wouldn't be the same without us.
The floor is yours, Ms. May.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lachaine. For my part, I think that Quebec is unique in the world. It is part of what makes Canada so rich, to have Quebec as part of Canada, a part which brings a great deal of richness to our culture. It's also important to talk about the other nations within Canada. It's unfortunate that in this debate we're not discussing Aboriginal rights. I'd like to state now that Aboriginal culture, the culture of our First Nations, is also very important. But I'm very proud to have Quebec part of Canada and all the other provinces as part of United Canada. We're a very fortunate country.
Ms. May, Mr. Duceppe.
The question was very interesting. What substantial powers, what should be the implications of this recognition? The Conservatives have told the rest of Canada not to worry, there won't be any legal consequences, but there should be consequences. We have to follow through. We've proposed various things, that French be the language of work in banks, airports, telecommunications, so on. The NDP supported us, but not the Liberals, even though they recognize that Bill 1 is a great piece of legislation. That should be recognized in federally regulated workplaces. What about culture? Well, Quebec doesn't have a seat at UNESCO. You have to be a country. So Quebec can only speak at UNESCO if the Canadian delegation gives it the green light.
Thank you very much, Mr. Layton.
To answer the question, we support the declaration, and we have supported it for a long time. We supported the proposals that French should and must be used in areas regulated by the federal government. It's the right of Quebecers to use French. I must stress the point made by Mr. Duceppe regarding culture. If we cut culture and the arts We make things worse in Quebec. We harm the Quebec nation. Your attack was upon the artists themselves, and I would like to ask you, what have you done for these to these artists?
I said that our government increased the budget for the culture and the arts by 8%. That's the biggest increase than the average increases in our
horrible
budget.
comments you made about artists in French.
Because I personally support the arts and culture. But what we're talking about here is recognizing the Quebec nation. And I need to remind you that when I proposed this in the House of Commons, the other parties accepted it immediately. It's only the Bloc Québécois. Gilles, you denounced me when I made the statement in the House of the Commons. For 2 days, you said that you were opposed to this idea, and in the end, Quebecers forced you to change your position on this. Now, that's the problem we have here. Because the Bloc, our government acted, and the Bloc reacted. But Quebecers want to have a strong place in Canada.
So in order, Mr. Duceppe and Mr. Dion.
Mr. Harper, we met just before you called the election, and you apologized for making a false statement on that day. Do you recall apologizing? You said it was one of your assistants who made the mistake, not you. But I took 24 hours to consult people. Let's set the record straight, and you apologized. The RCMP statement that the others got was the right one. I got the wrong one. And the second thing, it was Michel Gauthier who took the floor the second time, and he said we didn't get the right statement. But like a gentleman, you apologized when we met last time. A few days ago, you said I sent you the wrong document, but you said it wasn't me. It was once again one of my assistants. I'd like to continue with
told me this story. You criticized me when I proposed this in the House of Commons. You heard my statement. Your critics denounced me for 2 days.
Well, we were critical because we got the wrong document. But now I'd ask you to follow through. Why do you oppose having French as the language of work in banks in Quebec? Why are you cutting culture?
Interesting debate between these two individuals, these two people. But for the other people watching and the others around here, we want to know, will this government promote arts and culture? Because for us Quebecers, but Francophones all across the country, culture is what really makes our language live. It's important for us and for all Canadians. Now, the current government is not just cutting, but really is working against artists. We say, if we don't like you, we won't give you a grant. We'll choose the films we want to subsidize.
So